Thank you for listening to the Guys Who Do Stuff podcast.
So I was working my butt off, and a year into that job, my dad died. And, I remember after we went to the funeral, sitting in a bar going, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, all I'm doing is working, and I love it, but all I'm doing is working. I'm not paying any attention to like my personal life. And one of those realizations was when I would go to do my show, and you want to be authentic. That's what radio is about. Being authentic, sharing your life. And I go, I don't have any stories to share because all I do is work. I don't have any stories to share. And so that was kind of like the first in a string of events, life events that kind of, got me out of my bubble.
Thank you for listening to the Guys Who Do Stuff podcast. Visit guyswhodostuff.com. You probably shouldn't Google that.
All right, welcome to the Guys Who Do Stuff podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Josh.
This is the show where we help you get unstuck, tell a better story, and have a good answer to the question, what are you doing today? And today, super excited, we've got Brody on the show.
Hey. Thanks for having me,
Brody.
Yeah, man.
If the voice sounds familiar and you lived in the Triangle for a while, Brody is locally known for the years he spent on G105 on the morning show, Bob and the Showgram.
Yeah.
And then you moved out to Vegas.
I did.
And now you're back.
I am back.
With a vengeance.
This time, I promise I'm not leaving. I am staying.
So you appreciate North Carolina?
I love it. I didn't grow up here, but I've spent over 10 years living in Raleigh, and I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I just fell in love with it. I mean, everything about it, except for the humidity.
So I was checking out your website, Brody. It's brodyradio.com.
I just updated it, by the way, like last night.
I know, I saw, because I was on it last week, and then I was on there today. Nice job.
Thank you.
But on your About page, and this is what I want to start talking about, you said that radio wasn't part of the plan.
Right. So I went to school for cinema, TV, film production. I grew up as a kid making movies. That's really all I ever wanted to do.
What kind of movies did you like to make as a kid?
I was just kind of horsing around. I made horror movies. I would mess around in the bonus room above the garage. Then I went out and I would just do all kinds of stupid stuff in the yard where I was trying to blow stuff up. And there was actually a time where my parents were gone. I was a teenager, and I lit a fire in the basement, right? And I was doing it. I was filming something, and okay, so we had some gasoline for the snowblower. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to pour some of that out, and I'm going to light a fire, and I'm going to throw a truck through. And
in your mind, it's Michael Bay.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I had a leaf blower there just because I was like, safety first. And what I didn't take into consideration is that it was right underneath one of the smoke alarms in the basement, right? So it went off. And the fire department showed up. And, yeah, I haven't told that story in a while. And I thought I got away with it. And my parents knew it happened. So I did not get away with it. But I never got punished. So.
Well, maybe they thought, at least he's doing something creative.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
They were like, at least he didn't burn the house down.
But yeah, so I accidentally got into radio because in college, 2 months before I graduated, I was dating this girl who was doing a college radio show, and she said, hey, will you come down and support me and hang out for the show? I'm like, sure. And it was an early morning. That's all I remember. I was tired, but I went in there and I was watching her doing her thing, and she seemed like she was still a little green. She was grasping the controls and trying to figure out this, that, and the other. And I'm sitting there, and my first instinct was to want to help her and say, well, maybe you should try turning this up. And I didn't know anything about the equipment. I've never done radio at this point.
Yeah.
And I found myself doing all that. And that's when I realized, I'm like, well, this seems like it could be fun. And so I asked if there was any spots open where I could do a show. And they're like, sure. And I had a friend who I was really close with that I spent a lot of time with. And I said, hey, what do you think about doing a college radio show together?
Yeah.
And he's like, sure, let's do it. And, he's a little crazy and a little less. So it kind of made for some good moments, some that I'm not so proud of, some that were fun. And after I graduated, they let us continue doing it. And I'd spent my own money on posters. We would advertise that we're going to have this guest. We're giving away tickets to this.
Yeah.
And, then we would go out and do interviews. We would work with the college record reps who work at the record companies.
What was the show format?
We would play a little bit of music, but it was more of a talk thing.
Yeah.
So, but it was like late at night. So it was like 11 at night to like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And so I would play, we both chose what we wanted to play. And the only rule on the college radio station is you can't play top 40 music. So I said, okay. But so I would take the artists that were in the top 40 world, but I would play like the B-sides, you know, the songs that you don't hear on the radio.
Deep tracks.
But yes. Yeah. And then my friend, I don't know where the hell he was getting his music from, because I was like, I don't know what this is and you're scaring me. But he was totally into it. So it was two completely different worlds musically and personality wise. Because like I said, he was on the edge of, because you couldn't cuss on college radio, which I still don't understand why that was the case, because it was only campus wide. Yeah. So
colleges are known for their strict, nobody's cussing.
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess that went under the rule of, okay, you also can't play top 40 music. And I'm like, okay, well, I thought this was a student run radio station but whatever. And he would walk that line. I mean, we have jokes on there about the movie Titanic, which are so inappropriate. I can't even, but it was fun. And I look back on it now going, that's where what turned into a career was born. And, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So what was it like working on the Showgram? How long were you there?
I was on the show for 2 years.
Do you get this a lot? Because I told my wife, Brody's going to be on the podcast. He was on Bob and the Showgram. She's like, yeah, because she listens. She's like, yeah, they were mean to him. That was my wife's feedback.
Well, I think there were moments where we had disagreements. It's funny because people would say, oh, so was Bob a jerk? That's why you left. I'm like, no, he was actually really pleasant and easy to work with. Yeah. Right. So if you've been listening to the show for years, that's probably not your first assumption, but he really was. And, like you get into the groove of any job that you're doing, but there were times I'd sit there and I'm like, I'm working on Bob and the Showgram, because I always held that show in really high regard, even though I worked in the building and I had been working on other shifts. I was always a fan. And every morning I'd, even when I did the night show, I'd be listening in my room because I was a fan. Yeah. So, but yeah, look, like any radio show, there's going to be, disagreements, and there were some uncomfortable moments. Yeah. And I learned I learned that just because I was part of an ensemble and, it's Bob's show, to still hold my ground. Yeah. And not take any crap at moments where I felt like that's what I was getting a little bit of. So yeah, but overall it really was it was a great experience. I learned a lot, mostly how to wake up at 3 a.m.
Yeah. What was that like, getting used to that?
Well, I mean, 10 years before that, I was going to bed at 3 a.m. and waking up at 9. And then I found myself going to bed at 9 and waking up at 3. It's hard. It's a hard adjustment, because I would say to people in radio, how do you do this? And they say, you never get used to it. No matter how many years you've been working on a morning show, you never get used to it, and you have to take naps. Because we would have Don from ABC 11 doing the weather, and I guess his shift is kind of crazy too. And he'd be like, well, I go to bed at 7 p.m. I'm like, well, I couldn't do that. I can't do that. I'm a night owl, right?
How do you get yourself to fall asleep at that time? It takes work, I bet.
It was hard. And it also screws up your eating schedule. You're eating lunch when most people are eating breakfast.
Oh yeah. I never thought about that. So you eating dinner at 6 is like me eating at midnight.
I mean, well, look, let's be honest. I'd be going to bed at 10, and then that turned into, well, I fall asleep at 11. Right. So, it was hard to get used to, but, it was kind of cool. You don't have to deal with traffic, and it was a different world.
It seems like
it was a great experience.
From a listener's standpoint, G105 seems like a tight group of people that really get along and like each other.
There's been so many people through that building, and yet there are a lot of the people that are there now, like Erica, she's been there, she was there, then she left, and I don't know exactly what the timeline is. And the program director, this is his second tour there, and I've been there twice. So it's kind of like a lot of people come back, and it's just because G105 has that hometown feeling that not every radio station has that all over the country. And I mean, I've been to a few different cities and worked for different radio stations. It really has its own kind of hometown local vibe, and the people that work there do it because they love it. And, there's definitely been different groups of families there. I mean, my favorite time in radio was working at G105.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best case scenario when it's a dream when you get to work with your family. It really is. I mean, much like real families too, there are moments where you just want to be like, just get me out of here. But people say all the time when you get to work and it doesn't feel like work, it's like you never worked a day in your life. So that's the ideal situation, which spoiled me because I realize people are like, well, there's no such thing as a perfect job, which is true.
Right.
There isn't. But when you're all kind of on the same page and you're doing the same thing and everybody's pulling their weight and you have a mutual respect for everybody, then that's an ideal situation.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, great companies do that. Great companies make it feel like family, and great companies see people leave and then come back a couple of years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I've learned over the years, and I was talking with a friend recently who's very business minded and is so smart in the way, like he could be a leader. And he goes, well, I don't really know much about radio. And I'm like, radio is its own animal and it's a different animal. But, the thing that any business has in common at the end of the day, it's a job. At the end of the day, it's a business. And at the end of the day, there are leaders, and there are really good leaders, and there are really bad leaders. And, I've been doing a lot of reading, and, it's true. People don't leave jobs. They leave bad leadership.
Yeah.
What do you think makes a good leader?
I think somebody who is invested in more than just making money, for starters. I've been around people who are invested in the brand, invested in their people. When you know people, you know them, not just like what they can do for you and what their skill set is, but when you know their family and you care about them as people and not just as an employee, that makes a good leader. I think somebody who shows up and actually cares about the brand and not just about making money or getting ratings in regards to radio, because I've seen that kind of leadership style. That's not leadership.
Yeah.
I wish I was one of those kind of people that wasn't affected by that kind of leadership, but I am.
Yeah.
I am. And I mean, that's probably one of my downfalls is I thrive with a great team and great leadership. And I do the opposite when it's the opposite.
Yeah. I think that's pretty common. I think I've heard it said before that, let's say you work for a 300 person company, your view of the company is your boss. You're the person one step ahead of you. That's the company for you. Like you don't get to see anything different because that's your world. Mm-hmm. And so you can have a large company and have people that love working there. You have people that hate working there.
That's true.
The difference is the person one step above them. And that's why leadership is so important. Yeah.
It's definitely been really interesting. And, I think that's what we all have in common is that, sometimes I see it as in, you're not just looking, am I going to like this job? Is this something I could be happy with? But more so, is this leader the kind of person that I want to work for?
Yeah.
And they're going to bring out the best in me.
I heard a quote once that really stuck with me along the lines of like, life is too short to work with people you don't like.
I've never heard that, but whoever said that is brilliant.
Yeah.
Profound.
Yeah. I don't know who said it either, but it just kind of stuck with me. Life is too short to work with people you don't like.
But you know what? It's interesting because when I say things like this, I've heard, well, nothing's perfect. And I'm like, I'm not looking for perfect because that's impossible. Even when it was perfect for me, it wasn't perfect. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I think for me, I thrive around people that give a damn about what we're doing. And when it's the opposite, then that takes that has an impact.
Yeah.
And it pisses me off when that happens because that's not who I am.
Right.
You know, I hold myself in pretty high regards and high standards, and it's disappointing when you're not at that level. And so God bless people who can kind of be in their own zone and don't get affected by that kind of thing and that kind of leadership and that kind of team.
I think they're kind of turning a part of themselves off though, if that's your mentality. Like, screw it, paycheck. Like,
but I mean, people who can thrive in that kind of environment. Yeah. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe money or family or wanting to provide is such a motivation where it's like, I'm going to overcome all this. And I'd like to meet those kind of people, honestly, because I would love to be more that kind of person.
What are some of the big kind of tools of the trade that you feel like you learned from? How long have you been in radio now?
Over 15 years.
Over 15 years.
Yeah.
What are some of the things what are some of the lessons that you learned that you were surprised to learn about radio?
That I was surprised about radio? Wow. That's a great question. I think perk wise, everyone's like, well, we get free tickets and what a great perk. And that is a great perk, by the way. But some of the other perks you fall into and you're like, you feel guilty almost going, I should not be in the Caribbean working, which it is work, right? Because you're doing your show out there. And now that I'm kind of settling into this question, is the listeners and the impact that people have had on me. I can't tell you how many people I've heard from and how many people that connect with me that still say, how are things going? You know, we miss you on the show or on the radio station or whatever. And it's humbling. It's because when I left the show, for instance, when I left the Showgram, you know, I was like, you know what, this show is going to be fine. You know, I felt like I was just kind of a fill-in, and that, you know, not that I didn't have an impact, but that overall it really wasn't, you know, I'm not like really leaving a void. Right. And you know, what I learned is because I'm kind of like the average person, you know, Bob is Bob, Erica's Erica, you know? And so I'm like, I was the boring person on the show. And somebody once said that, well, you know, there's a lot of normal people in the world.
Yeah. Which makes you the relatable person.
Yeah. So I guess I was just really kind of surprised and humbled by how many people like just had reached out and said, hey, how's everything going? You know, we miss, you know, having you be, you know, on the radio in the community kind of thing.
Yeah. It's crazy to think about that for thousands of people in the Triangle. They listen to you guys every morning. Like, you were a part of their routine. You were part of their commute. You were a part of them getting ready. And I feel like it's just now settling on me. Like, of course they felt like they knew you and they were invested in your life. That has to be a kind of a cool feeling.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I was on the inside. I mean, Bob obviously shares a lot of his life and Erica does as well. And, you know, I felt like they've got families, you know, and they have so much going on. And for me, I was in a different part of my life where I didn't have maybe as many stories, or I don't know, but it was really humbling. And that was probably the biggest thing that surprised me about the industry. I was like, wow, these people are either really, really nice, either really nice people live in a Triangle, or, you know, I don't know.
You didn't find the same kind of community in the audience in Vegas?
Well, no, actually Vegas is great. I will say this. When I moved down to North Carolina, I was coming from Connecticut, and I went to school in Connecticut, and I had worked a few jobs in Connecticut, and I did not like Connecticut. By the way, I've got a few close friends that are from Connecticut, and I tell them that. I go, I don't know how you're not an a-hole, because I really dislike living in Connecticut. It's cold. It's expensive. Two things that are facts, by the way. And the third thing, people are just not friendly.
Is it Connecticut or Connecticut?
Connecticut.
So no Connecticut, even though there's a C before the T.
I don't know why those extra letters are in there.
Do you know what surprised me? That John Mayer is from Connecticut.
Yeah.
That's awesome. John Mayer, but he's from Connecticut.
Why does it surprise you?
You were like, hey, you guys couldn't see, but Josh all lit up when he said John Mayer, and then when he said Connecticut, he got there's that.
By the way, like, look, there are cool things about Connecticut, Mohegan Sun Casino. So I don't want to totally rank on it. It's just, for me, it wasn't what I was looking for. So when I moved to North Carolina, I'm like, I felt like I was taking a chance. I'm like, I'm moving to the sticks.
Yeah, everybody
yeah.
says that. You're just going to hit deer when you drive around down there. Well, shut up.
Well, in Clayton, you do almost hit deer every time you're driving at night. So let's be fair. But, it was, I felt like I was taking a chance, and, it was a completely different world when I'm moving into the apartment and random strangers are going, "Hey, how are you?" And I'm like, "You talking to me?
You like meatloaf? I got some meatloaf for you. Right, welcome to the neighborhood."
Yeah. Well, even my sister now says, "What is this y'all thing? You never talked like that." And I'm like, "I don't have an accent. Y'all." Okay. Yeah, I guess that's a little different.
It makes sense. It's 2 words in one. It saves time.
Yeah. Well, and to me,
we're all about efficiency.
It's fun to use too, guys. Say it. Let's all say it. Take turns. Ready? Y'all.
I don't think I use y'all very often.
Y'all have a
You
fun
just
show.
used it.
Yeah, I did.
Y'all have a fun show?
You know what? You live in the Bible Belt. Start saying y'all.
Need to
Learn to
just
say
make it,
y'all.
yeah,
It is a part
all the time.
of that's, in Vegas, by the way, I think, the community there is amazing. And, I think when people go there, it's like, well, it's just this, a transient tourist destination. But I think especially over the course of the last few years, what I've seen is the community there that lives there really, they care.
You're talking about Vegas?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there a lot of Filipinos there?
I don't know.
You didn't, in 5 years, you didn't meet any Filipinos?
I was there for 1 year.
Oh, 1 year,
I didn't
right.
really pick up on that.
You didn't get into Philippines. I know there's a lot of Filipinos there because my wife's Filipina, and we keep hearing, there's a lot of Filipinos out in Vegas, but they don't go to the strip. They live outside.
Right.
But when you meet them, you get in the Filipino world. It's hot, like food. People are fun, really
I don't know
friendly.
much about
Well, when we go back to Vegas, the 3 of us will go.
Okay. You know what? We should do a podcast, just even if it's 1 episode in Vegas.
Yeah. Road trip. We'll expense it. Wait,
we don't have an Brody trip.
Bro trip. But I think for me, before I even moved there, like maybe 6 months before I moved there, my girlfriend and I were there for a conference that she was attending, and she invited me to go because it was her first time in Vegas. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's, it'll be a great time. Let's go. And I remember sitting in the hotel. I think it was like the second day we were there, and we were exhausted because the time change and everything. And the news was on, and this was 3 days after that shooting had happened. And I remember even that Monday morning, following the big shooting at the
MGM
91 festival, and seeing it at 3 a.m. when I'm doing some of my research for the morning show for Bob, and going, it was just scary. And knowing that a few days later we were flying there for this conference, and watching the news, and people were lined up around the block and then some to give blood. And that's when I realized Vegas is not just,
right.
Which, I mean, I think that's kind of an ignorant way to think of, Vegas, because it's not just the strip, and it's not just crazy parties and, people that are there but that, the community, but like that kind of brought the community together.
Yeah.
Right. And now there's a hockey team there, which in their first season almost won the Stanley Cup.
What's their name?
The Vegas Golden Knights.
Nice.
And nobody expected this team to win.
Yeah.
They're like, oh,
nobody would expect the desert team to crush it in hockey.
Well, guys, it's not like those guys grew up in the desert. They're all like imported from Canada, right? Come on now.
Some of them, yeah.
And other places.
But it brought this level of excitement to people that live there. So, all these things, are really bringing the community out, and it's an amazing community.
So, what's next? What's the next chapter look like for you? You're back.
That's a good question. I ended up leaving Vegas. I guess was it a year and maybe 2 months into being there, something like that. And I had a 2-year contract to work out there. And the reason I had left the Showgram and gone is because, waking up early was tough, but the truth is I wanted to get back into programming and have more control over the radio station as a whole. Cause that's my background, is not working in morning radio, but working for radio station behind the scenes and on the air, which is kind of what I enjoy doing. and having more control over the product as a whole. And I missed that, and I wanted to get back into it, and that opportunity wasn't there. Working at G105, and another branch, which happened to be in Vegas, reached out to me, same company, and I had been with the company for like 17 years, and flew out there, and I was like, wow, Vegas. I don't know about living in Vegas.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was for like, it was for an AC station, adult contemporary. So I was like, and then I'm sitting there going, well, because a lot of people say people go to do adult contemporary radio, they go there to, their career dies there.
Oh yeah.
I've heard that. I don't know if that's still something that people in our industry say or not, but I'm like,
that's the way people think about it, though.
I'm like, what? I like exploring opportunities, even if it's something that I'm not sure if it's going to be a fit. I'm like, I want to explore it, and maybe something good will come of it. And they flew me out there, and I was like, and I was like, all right, job wise, I was like, okay, this seems like a cool place. And I was driving around to see what the community was like. And I was like, there's actually some vegetation here. I've been trying to figure out where to live. And so, I got back to town, and I was like, I think I want to do this job. The only thing was, I was leaving a relationship behind. And so my girlfriend and her son. And, here's kind of this was really an interesting part of my life, because for all these years I've been doing radio, this has really kind of been, I've been going around the country for different opportunities. And now, I've experienced dating somebody who has a son. And so kind of realizing really what this family unit is like, and what it means to be a part of it. And so when I left, that was a pretty tough decision. And, I think for me, what it ended up being is saying, look, I've been in this industry for 15 plus years, and I don't know, and this is what would be interesting to me to ask people who have been in whatever their field is, whatever their craft is for so long, if you could never work in that job again, could you work somewhere else and be successful? Could you do something completely different and be successful? Because for me, and for a lot of people that I know in my industry, like, we'd always be terrified going, well, if we got laid off and all of a sudden there were no opportunities, I'd be screwed. I have no idea what I'm going to do. If I'm not in radio, who am I? What am I going to do? Mm-hmm. And so that fear is what led me away from, and I consider my girlfriend and her son my family. But, that's what led me away. And
so what brought you back?
They brought me back, but it was, so what happened was I was there for a few months, and, the long distance thing didn't work out. And so I'm doing the job out there, and a few months in, I'm like, we had kind of kept in touch. And, what I realized was, I had gotten into a headspace where I was terrified to get out of the industry of radio. I'm like, I can't do anything outside of radio. I can't. And so I kind of felt like, I don't want to use this word, but for a lack of a better word, because I think if people, in the industry hear it, they're going to be like, well, that's a negative connotation. But I kind of felt like a prisoner of the industry that I loved working in. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Because I was like, I can't see myself outside of this industry doing anything. I can't. I'm going to fall flat on my face. I can't make money. And, and I sat there and I said, what a defeatist attitude. Surely that's not the case, because I started going, I miss them. And again, going 15 plus years, and this career is really all that I know. And then all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I kind of made the decision saying I need to get back there. And not to mention, my mom also lives on the East Coast, and she's a multi-time cancer survivor. And so I lived across the country from her as well. And, one of the things that I had learned, my dad passed away, and he had been living overseas because he retired overseas, and he passed away. And I was planning on going to visit him. I wasn't there for it. So I was like, I didn't get to see him before he passed away. And I was working my ass off at the job I was in. I was a program director. So I was in a manager role for 3 years. It was my first management role, which is the reason I had left Raleigh the first time, and G105, which was that was like, I felt like I was taking a gamble there. I'm like, G105, everyone I worked with felt like family. Right. And working at the radio station was like my second home. And I was leaving all of my friends. Like, I established a life that I just fell in love with. And so I left to go to do management, and I was just working like a madman. Between, taking care of a staff, being on the air, scheduling music, doing events outside the building, social media. Radio, is one of those industries that it doesn't have the staff it used to. Consolidation is really real. And, with social media now, that's a full-time job.
Right.
So,
well, it should be if you do it right.
Right. So I was working my butt off, and a year into that job, my dad died. And, I remember after we went to the funeral, sitting in a bar going, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, all I'm doing is working, and I love it, but all I'm doing is working. I'm not paying any attention to like my personal life. And one of those realizations was when I would go to do my show, and you want to be authentic. That's what radio is about. Being authentic, sharing your life. And I go, I don't have any stories to share because all I do is work. I don't have any stories to share. And so that was kind of like the first in a string of life events that kind of, got me out of my bubble, so to speak. And then, my mom's a multi-time colon cancer survivor. She's the toughest human being I know. And so, being in Vegas, being so far away from mom, that played a major role as well. And so, I'm like, everybody I consider families on the East Coast. And I just need to get back. My mom's battling, she's had little cancerous polyps, come back up. And so she's back, battling that now, taking different steps. And so I'm like, I just need to be back on the East Coast. I need to be with my family. And so I made the decision for the first time in my career to leave a job in the middle of a contract. And it was one of those things where I'm like, you know what, this is probably not going to be a good look. And I don't care. It's not that I don't care. Let me rephrase that. So it was just that I was prioritizing. And I said, you know what, if radio ends up being something that, because of this personal decision doesn't continue, then I'll be okay, because, I was prioritizing my life, and I'm like, I want to be with the people that I love. And, been with the company for 17 years. I've busted my ass. And you know what, like whatever the universe has in store, I love radio. I'd love to continue working in it. But if that's not what's in store, and, the universe has something better and different, then so be it. But I do know now, where my life needs to be. And so it's probably the biggest thing I've kind of done in terms of like, just taking a step.
So I have a question. So you guys met at a podcast meetup group. Why did you go to that meetup group?
Well, I'm friends with Gene and Julie, who said, hey, why don't you come to this, podcast meetup? And I said, okay, because podcasting is something I've dabbled in. I've never really done it. I've never really jumped into it full time. And, for me right now, I'm just kind of trying to explore what,
who's Gene and Julie? Who's that?
So they were the morning show on Mix 101.5, who, like, ironically, they were a competitor, I guess, for the Showgram. So, but, I had a chance to meet up with them one morning, and we talked, and, we're very much on this like same wavelength in regards to radio. And I mean, we sat there, we had breakfast, and we ended up talking for like 3 hours.
What did you have for breakfast?
And I had the Eggs Benedict
Where do you like Eggs Benedict? Is that your favorite breakfast?
I wouldn't say it's a favorite, but I do like it.
It's right up there. Did you find a good place in Vegas for Eggs Benedict for $2?
I don't know if I ever had Eggs Benedict in Vegas. Come to think of it,
is steak still $2 in Vegas? Is it like $3 for a meal, right? In the casino?
No.
And it's jacked up now, like 7,
it's
8.
expensive, man. I would always tell people, I'm like, you need to go to Lux Cafe in the basement of the Venetian. Never a wait, outstanding service, great food. And yes, it's a chain, but.
So what is it about like radio that makes your heart sing apart from the experience, but what is it about this world that like makes you really light up?
I just like connecting with people, which, when you ask that other question, I guess that was the most surprising how you can end up connecting with people. And, right now, more than anything, I mean, part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is because I want to inspire people maybe who are in a situation that they might want to change. And, and it doesn't matter what other people think, by the way, most importantly, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Because I knew people would be like, so you're leaving and you don't have a job lined up. That's correct. And
it's life. Everybody goes through that, crosses that bridge. But what about your dating life? Are you single now or dating or what?
I am back with my girlfriend. And so.
Does she have a kid?
More long distance. She does. She does. Yeah. And he and I have a great relationship.
That's good.
And
what is he? How old is he?
He's 15. Super smart kid. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that both of his parents have a great co-parenting relationship. As a matter of fact, I get along great with his dad, and they have a great co-parenting relationship. And I feel like even that right there, it's inspiring because I come from a divorced household, and my parents, like, they hated each other. I mean, they hated each other. And so, I think when she and I originally started dating, she's like, look, I need to tell you something. I'm like, you have a kid. Okay. All right. And she's like, well, Braxton's dad and I are taking him on a cruise for his birthday as a surprise, like 6-7 months down the line. So she's like, I know some people would have a problem with that. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. I'm glad that you guys have such a great co-parenting relationship, because I came from a divorced household, and you know what, you're doing what's right for him. And, and then I met the guy, and I'm like, hey, he's cool. We get along great. So
do you feel like Will Ferrell and Stepdad? Or more like Mark Wahlberg? No, would be like Will Ferrell.
I don't think I've seen that movie.
Oh gosh. It's therapeutic.
All right. Well, I'm going to put that on my list now.
Add it to the queue.
Things to see.
So you mentioned earlier, like the desire to inspire people who are maybe in a situation similar to what you were going in. And I told my wife after the meetup that I had a conversation with you afterwards. And I was like, we had a lot in common, because I just recently, a lot of similarities in our story. Recently left what felt like family with a job that I was good at and I liked a lot. And started my own company. And when I first quit, I remember thinking, but not knowing until like it actually happened, how much I was starting over. Like I thought, I'm just kind of starting over, but I still, all this experience is going to translate, right? But the reality of it really smacked me in the face. Like, no, like I'm completely starting over at like 38. That's a good decision. That's a good move, Joe. That's smart kind of thinking. But the reason behind the change and the reason to do it and sticking with it for a little bit quickly, like in a course of a couple of months, went from like, well, I know I did the right thing. And what I thought I was going to not be excited about, or the skills that I was worried weren't going to transfer, they do transfer, and work is work. And it kind of quickly settled down. But I think I told you, and I was joking a little bit, like, settle down is like, I'm a big fan of being honest to where you're at. Like the first couple of months, like it was like every morning I woke up like, what did you do? What are you going to do today? Like you had a perfectly good job.
Yes.
Now the house is empty. What, you can drink coffee all day? What's the plan there? And then that made its way down to like once every 3 days where I'd have that little panic attack waking up in the middle of the night, and whittled down to like 3 weeks. And now I'm like 8 months in, and now I get it like every 4 weeks, I would say.
I can relate to that for sure. But I went through what you went through too, going, how are any, like, talking on the radio, that's not really, you can't implement that anywhere. You can't schedule music. You can't implement scheduling music, a piece of software, into any other job. Like, I'm screwed. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, and by the way, for anybody who does have opportunities, I'm skilled in all these positions that I didn't even know I was skilled in, like marketing, promotions, public speaking, brand management, working with clients. And then I sat there, I'm like, oh, I can't do sales. I've never done sales. I'm like, and then, after a few conversations with a handful of people, like, you've worked in sales for over 15 years. It's just how you see it. And so my mindset really had to change. I mean, did you find yourself having that same kind of?
Yeah. So for me, it was like, I thought the thing that I loved was the job and the role. And I think a lot of people think that. They think the thing that they love is the job and the role. But I think what people fall in love with is the relationships, the connections, the doing stuff together. And so I don't know, I imagine like you, like the thing I miss the most is the people. Like, it's kind of heartbreaking sometimes. Like, I just want to go back like George Costanza and just work for like a couple of days and get the relationships going again,
I mean, it's totally the people, because having worked in the same building on two different occasions, two different times of life, there were people at one point there that I would have killed for. And then when I came back, some of those people were gone. And I'm like, it's not the same. It's not the same. I mean, granted, even when I came back, there were people there that I really cared about. But some of the people that had left, I was like, it's different. And so it really is the people.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
I saw and I watched your trailer online for the show that you're working on.
Oh God, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought, and we had a great conversation about it, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit here, but I know it's just a podcast and you don't get to see it, but go to brodyradio.com and watch this when you're not driving your car or walking your dog or something. But I'm actually just going to play the clip here because I think even just the audio kind of translates.
It's so easy to travel and to just be about your own thing. You don't want to be bothered by anyone.
Living your best life.
Sedona. Love this place.
Seeing the world.
I don't ever think of people as strangers.
Making memories.
She came out screaming that, she walked in on him and he was just laying there on the top of the bed, on top of the covers, just in his whitey-tighty, she said.
And friendships.
It's my guide. Get us lost.
You could make some income from having an empty room in the house, so it kind of made sense.
So you get smart. Staying with strangers.
The strangers I meet were actually nicer than the guy I was married to.
That's my favorite line in that whole thing.
It's great because it's funny, and also you're like, oh, do you need a hug?
Yeah.
But I love the idea when you told me about what it was. So it's this idea about the travel industry, things like where you can stay in people's homes now, tons of sites that exist for this, and the community that goes from traveling that way versus how we do most of the stuff in our life, which is isolated. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to know anybody, which is kind of like what a lot of hotels are designed for. Like, I don't want to my room, my key, leave me alone. And
That's true.
It's kind of like an adventure show. And in that travel market,
so what I found is, and everybody loves to travel, right? So for me, when I discovered Airbnb, and it's not meant to be a commercial for Airbnb, because there are a handful of services that are like Airbnb. It's just, that happens to be the one that I've used the most. And I was like, wow, you can stay in places that are way cheaper than staying in hotels. And then, in some cases you feel like you're staying in your own place. It's like, or you're staying with mom, or so, for me, the concept was, it became interesting when we started hosting people at my girlfriend's house, because she had a room above the garage, a big bonus room. And, we started meeting people, and let me backtrack. It didn't start that way. We had taken a trip to Key West, and it's outrageously expensive to stay in Key West. It's expensive to fly there. It's expensive. It's just an expensive place. But we went there. We did Airbnb for the first time together. and we loved it. The host was greatest human being, and he really made it. I mean, that was his job, hosting people. He was renting this house from a friend who owned it, and I forget what the backstory was, but this guy had worked for, I want to say maybe Aetna for years. He was in a high position. He was making them so much money. And he was telling us the story the day we checked in. He goes, I finally just made a decision to leave because they weren't taking care of me. They didn't care. I made them all this money. They didn't care. So he's like, I left a 6-figure job to come down here and take care of my friend's house. And it just so happened where he allowed me to rent out rooms here. And I think the guy said he was making like 15 grand a month or something insane.
Wow.
And it's still like, it was like, he's charging like half the price of what what you're paying to stay in a hotel. And the greatest guy is like, you could park here free, making us drinks. I think one of the, we were there, maybe, was it 2 nights? I don't know. But the one night he ended up making us all these drinks, and I don't think we left because we got really drunk. And he was just
part of his way to get people to stay another day.
Yeah, right.
He's just really good at marketing.
But you could tell he gave, he cared about connecting with people and not just having hey, rent out the room and, have the house to yourself, do whatever you want to do. He actually cared about engaging with people. And I think that's part of what we really connected with. And so, after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do Airbnb because, there's all kinds of, and I don't want to make this a commercial about what the service is, but if you're one of those people where, let's say you have a family, like, we can't afford to stay in hotels. It's just expensive. And I'm like, this isn't, bashing hotels, because sometimes I do want to stay in a hotel. Sometimes, depending where you are, it might be the same price point. And so, but if it could make it more affordable for you to travel, we went to Salt Lake City on a ski trip, and we rented out what was a basement that was finished in this home. And it was like top of the line. They like redid it. It had a kitchen, refurbished bathroom, even the bedroom, and the way it was decorated. Everything about it was amazing, especially the price point. And I'm like, I can't believe we're staying in a place like we're staying, even though it's in somebody else's house, it's a basement. And for the price point. And to me, that was one of my favorite experiences. Even though we didn't connect super tight with those people, it was the right price point, but it felt like I didn't, it felt different from like a hotel room. So, but in that same vein, we started having people come to her house because, had this bonus room above the garage, and a bed, a queen size bed, extra furniture and everything. And so it was like, well, people make money off of doing this. We had remembered the story that the guy had shared with us in Key West, going, well, we're not going to make that kind of money. Right. But sure enough, we met a lot of people. And I remember this one couple in specific who are from New Zealand, and the guy was a day trader. And normally we meet people, we do talk to them for a few minutes, get to know them, and then everybody kind of gets on to their, doing whatever they're doing. And we ended up staying up till like 4 a.m, I think, with these people, connecting and talking. And, and we've stayed in touch with them. And that's when I realized, I go, traveling and hosting people, because my mom used to be like, how is she letting strangers in the house when she's got a teenager who's 13 or whatever? And, that would definitely be, or why would you stay in a stranger's house when you don't know them? And I think that was kind of like the disconnect there. Right. And now my mom understands, but it was one of those things where Tara would vet, the people that would request to stay there. And there are certain ways you can look at people's ratings and such, right? But she would really vet them. And she goes, I really want to get to know what these people are. And probably even more so than the average person does, where they just like kind of look at the rating and then make a decision. Yeah. And, we made some great friendships, and it was a great experience. And then when I was in Vegas, I had a roommate who was there for 2 months. It didn't work out. I tried to get a roommate on roommates.com, And that did, that wasn't working because everyone was trying to be like, well, I only want to pay like 300. And I'm like, well, that's not happening. So, and
they want 6 roommates from roommates.com. $300. Yeah.
When I started Airbnb, there was this one guy, and he was a 69-year-old Indian man who was coming in for CES, which is like a big tech conference in Vegas. For
Consumers electronics something.
Yeah. And he goes, hey, I like to cook, and I noticed your kitchen's really nice. I'm like, sure, whatever. He's like, and I'm thinking to myself, I've tried Indian food once, and I just didn't like it. It was too spicy, and oh my God, like, is the house gonna smell? And he comes, and it ended up being he was my favorite guest. And
so he cooked for you?
You know what? He cooked, and it changed my entire idea on Indian food. And all of a sudden I'm like, because I told him, I go, look, I'm not good with spicy. I can't do spicy. And my experience of curry just wasn't a positive one, but I'm willing to try it again. Right. And I was like, oh my God, can you make more of that? That was awesome. And he gave the advice he gave, because at the time, I'm in Vegas and all these things are going on where I'm out there doing the job and making decent money. But I'm like, I need to be back on the East Coast with the people that I love. I've got a mom who's battling, cancer, and I just need to be back with these people. And, he gave very simple advice. And for some reason, it really just kind of connected with me, where he goes, whatever you do, just be happy. Just like those 2 words. And it was kind of a moment where we're sitting at the kitchen table, and he goes, just whatever you do, be happy. As simple as the concept as that is, it just, for some reason, it connected with me on a deeper level, maybe because the extended conversation he and I were having. Cause I'm like, this is a 69-year-old, man who's from another country, different culture, the whole nine. And we just totally connected. And so
that's awesome. And that's a super transformative question. Like, be happy, because for a lot of us, we never stop and say like, is this working? Am I happy? And I think we run from that question because we might know the answer.
Yes.
And we don't want to sit still long enough.
Well, like I said, when my dad passed and my mom going through everything she's going through, those are really the reasons why I'm going to be like, I have to leave. I have to leave. Now, by the way, I tried to stay in the company. There was some opportunity and that didn't work out. And I said, you know what? I'm still going to do what I'm going to do because life is short. My parents have proved that. And I'm going to do what I need to do and go where I need to be and take a leap of faith. And that's what I've done. And
well, I love this Staying with Strangers thing because it's clear that it's a passion project. It's something you're excited about. What are you hoping to accomplish with it?
Honestly, for me, the biggest thing is inspiring people to travel. Yes, you can afford to travel. Because, I feel like services like VRBO, Airbnb, and this kind of thing aren't necessarily as common knowledge and widespread as, let's say, Uber. And that the concept of staying with staying in a stranger's house, and some of them are apartments, some of them are just bedrooms. So if you're staying in an apartment, I guess that's not such a weird thing. But if you're staying in a house where it's like 3 bedrooms, like we did in Key West, it was 3 bedrooms and you're meeting a ton of other strangers. So you're staying in a stranger's house and then there are other strangers there and you're like, oh my God.
Why do you think we think that's so much weirder than a hotel? Because that's exactly what we do in a hotel. It's just
because you're in closer quarters.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't know, but that is a great question. I mean, look, would you open up if either of you guys had an extra bedroom and you can make like serious money, which you probably could, by the way. I don't know what kind of house you're in, but would you sit there and would you be open completely to go, oh, I would love to have strangers in my house?
Yeah, my wife and I actually talked about it because we have a pretty sweet setup in our basement that's got its own galley kitchen and bathroom and everything.
Do it.
And but my daughter just moved down there, so now her room's down there. But yeah, we talked about it because it's got a separate door and it could have worked out. And when we ran the numbers on it, they were certainly not anything to shake a finger at. Like, it was significant.
It is significant. Josh, do you?
Not in this stage of my life. Not interested.
But it's, it really is. That's why I was like, it's a benefit for everybody, because if you have space, that's another stream of income. My girlfriend Tara has really inspired me, like over the course of while I was gone, she kind of dove into a lot of things and she's got multiple streams of income, and she has a full-time job working for Duke, but she's got multiple streams of income. And I'm like, she really is inspiring. And I'm like, I can't picture myself being an entrepreneur, but I go, I like connecting with people and making money and helping other people. So I'm like, if you have space in your house, you can host people, you meet people, and that's what Staying with Strangers is about. It's yes, it helps you afford to travel, which everybody loves to do and should do more of, by the way, because I've met so many people from North Carolina that have never stepped foot outside the state. And I'm like, look, North Carolina is beautiful, the mountains, the beach. But there's so much to experience, and yes, you can afford to do it. So it's inspiring people there, but also when you have extra space, you can make extra money. And whether that's pocket change or whether that's, even if you're only making like $30 a night, that's going to add up.
Yeah.
And, but the deeper meaning is the people that you meet can have a huge impact on your life. The 69-year-old Indian man who really even though it was a simple concept for me, it was a big moment. I'm not saying that was the moment where I decided to come back. There were multiple events and moments where I was like, I'm going to make the decision I'm making, but, I like the relationships.
I liked what you said earlier and I think I found myself, I don't know what it was like for you. I don't want to speak for you necessarily, but like when I get in that mode and like the head's down and I'm trying to get work done, I can relate with what you said, which I just didn't have any stories. Like I just wasn't, my life had become not a great story. Mm-hmm. I went to work. I did the thing and I did the thing.
Because you're going through the motions.
Yeah, going through the motions. And I think what this concept represents is it like you're putting yourself in the place to have adventures. Like you're going to have some stories. Like it's not always going to be, there's going to be funny stories. And I think that's why it's an interesting concept for a show. There's going to be dramatic stories like that one lady. You're going to have hosts that do funny stuff, but you're going to have stories and you're going to build relationships, which is, it's a big part of life. I remember I told you there's a book by Robert McKee. Have you read a story by Robert McKee?
I've read about it, not read it yet.
So it's a long book. I don't think a lot of people have actually read it, but it's like one of those things like these are the fundamental story blocks of telling stories. And then he wrote a book called Dialogue, which is about how to write for movies. And he had this great line, and I don't know if I'm misquoting it. And if I am, he doesn't listen to this podcast, but the gist of it was, he was like, when you want to write authentic dialogue and you want it to sound real, if what you're talking about is what you're talking about, you're fucked. And the point was like, if I'm having a conversation with you about like, do you want to get in the car and go to the place with me? Then that's boring. That's not an interesting story. But if there's context or subtext behind it, like you getting in the car represents your character taking some step forward or doing something that is outside of what you would normally do. And you're progressing towards something, then you're writing good dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think this concept for the show that you have, Staying with Strangers, is that. It's because it's about traveling and staying with strangers, but it's about human connection. That's what it's about.
And it all comes from the cell phone because, everybody gets on people, get off your phone. By the way, there was a time, and I'm so much better about this. God, I've become such a better human being. Thank you, God. But I was the guy that my girlfriend would be talking to me in the kitchen and I get a text and I pick up the phone. That's how I was conditioned. I'm like, well, I have to see who this is, you know? And I look back and I'm still like, I'm still a, what do they call it? In progress.
A work in progress?
A work in progress. But, I look back going, I've had to train myself at dinners to have the phone. If the phone goes off, I don't need to look at it. So, but basically an app is bringing people together. Now, this thing that's driving people apart, where people are in a common place in the airport. And back in the day, what did people do? They had to talk to each other. You didn't have the phone.
Yeah.
You didn't have computers everywhere. And now this device that's dividing people is bringing people together. And that's another concept where,
Cool. All right. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is I think you're in a similar boat that a lot of creatives are. You have this great concept for a show. You've got something that I think people want to listen to. You've got the ability and the wherewithal to make it happen. Like I said, people can go check out at brodyradio.com. You can go watch the trailer. But so many of us in that situation, and I say us because I feel like this podcast that Josh and I are doing, it's a real labor of love. It's a passion project, but we're consistent and we're working to get better. And I feel like we got something to say. And just that idea of like, how do you get seen?
That's a great question.
I was hoping you have the answer.
I had it. Well, you're screwed. No. So I had this idea for a little while of wanting to, because I have a video production background. And so I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily care about being on TV. That was never a focus. But I'm like, it would be cool to host this because I had my own twist on this concept. So, which for me is, I like to see where things were filmed.
Yeah.
I don't care about meeting celebrities. I care about seeing where things were filmed. And I feel like there are so many cities across the country that have stories about, this was filmed here, this was filmed here.
Yeah.
So, but I said to myself, I'm going to go through this trouble of putting together this documentary, and it takes a long time to film and especially edit things. The whole thing is 7 minutes long, but it took me like a month to edit.
Yeah.
So I was like, God, is it really worth putting all this time and effort into? Are people going to care about it? Is it going to resonate with people, or is it just my own idea? And and my ego says, hey, this is really interesting. But I'm like, I wanted to ask the question, is this something that people are really going to care about? And can it inspire anybody? I mean, is it interesting enough of a concept? And I sat down with a friend of mine in Los Angeles who was a child actor. And now he still has his hands in writing and producing in Hollywood. And I floated the concept to him, and he had I think a similar concept for like an Uber show or whatever. But and then I said, well, that's interesting because I have this concept for like an Airbnb kind of thing. And he goes, that can actually be. It could be funded, it could be sponsored, and here are all the ways. And one of the things that I'm trying to get better at is thinking from a business strategy standpoint.
Yeah,
I'm more of I'm not going to call the art side because I have no artistic abilities, I feel like, but I'm trying to exercise my business strategy muscle because it doesn't get any exercise at all. And that's where I could probably use the most growth in my life. So all these things that he was saying, and I'm like, I don't know why I didn't think of that. That's true. And he goes, you can make money being a host if you host, but also you're the creator of this show and concept. And so when he made me realize, he goes, if this connects and you find a production house or, a distributor, then, you can make a living doing this and sell sponsorships. And I was like, wow. And that was the moment. It was in a bar in Los Angeles. And that was the moment where I decided I'm going to do this. And then I was like, well, where am I going to start it? And then I'm like, Arizona. Let me go to Arizona because I love Arizona. I have friends there. I love visiting. And, and I was like, worst case scenario, this lives on YouTube.
Yeah.
And friends see it and whoever. Best case scenario, this ends up being a docuseries, and you can make it different because you're in different locations and different cities. And for me, it was, the twist that if I were the host, the fun twist on it, because everything has to have entertainment value. I mean, when you're watching Love It or List It,
right?
It is an interesting concept to see, even though that's fake. It's an interesting, well, it's not fake, but there are elements. And I don't want to spoil the behind the scenes of what I've learned, but it is fun to watch because the hosts have a lot of personality,
right,
and they're competing. And because the drama of what people are looking for in a house and how they're butting heads with like the hosts on the show, because that's not what I want. And so for me, the entertainment value that I try to bring to it is I like to see where things were filmed. So that's kind of, my fun little, I got to go to the Tucson studios to see one of the most famous places, studios in the middle of the desert, literally. And they filmed so many cowboy movies. John Wayne movies, and all I care about is the fact that they filmed Three Amigos there. It's just one of my favorite movies, and I felt so dumb, but I was like, I don't care.
Yeah, there was a scene where it was cut, and I thought you did a really good job with it, where it's like, yep, I recognize that right away from Three Amigos.
Yeah, I was so geeked. I was such a geek about it, and then I'm like, I had met people in the Tucson and Phoenix area, and that's when I met that one lady who I had stayed with. Both of the people who I interviewed in the documentary, I had stayed with them, and I loved staying with them.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, here's a concept I have, and I think I want to put this together. and we kept in touch. And then I said, hey, look, I really want to go through the production of this. Can I interview you? And they said, yes. So I did a separate trip. I drove out there to Phoenix. I interviewed them. And I said, well, let me see what kind of audio I'm going to get out of this. And Diane, the one lady who initially she was telling my story, but it came out in that soundbite that you played a little earlier in the podcast. And that's when I knew, that's when I got even more excited, because I'm like, what a great line.
Yeah.
She was married, she got divorced. And I believe what the line was, what I realized are these strangers ended up being nicer than the guy that I was married to. And I'm like, this is the line of the entire, because the other lady, she was talking a lot about the concept of, why they did it, and the concept of having people come stay with you, and why, that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
But Diane, she had that line, and I'm like, meeting people who end up being cool, and you're like, God, even the guy I'm married to is
I think so we went to this thing together. That's where we met, this meetup, and the guy asked us not to share any details about it, but I appreciated his candor, because he told a story about how he got a big client, and everybody wants to think you get the big client because, whatever, like some magical, mystical, they respect you. You've had this long sheet of things that you've done that have been successful. So they call you up and they're like, we need you to do our thing. And he was like, I'd love to tell you that's what happened. But what happened was I sat next to the VP of marketing at our kids' game. And then I just threw out the idea.
That's such a cool,
and that's how it worked.
Concept.
And, but when I watched I watched the full 7-minute version of it. The first thing that came to my mind was like, this is content marketing for Airbnb.
I know. Well, and I reached out to them. I emailed them, to be fair. And I didn't necessarily think that they're going to be like, this is the greatest thing ever. Because for me, I don't necessarily look at this documentary going, well, this is exactly what they need to put on as a pilot, and this is perfect. And no, for me, I was like, look, what is the right concept? What is the right production? What is the right, style? I go, this is just me putting my idea and my vision down on video. And so I had emailed them, and I never heard back. And then what I discovered was a lot of these, like Netflix and Hulu and such, they don't take open submissions. And this was after I finished the project. And I was like, well, damn, how, but I have not heard back. I haven't heard from the Airbnb folks, but I know they do their kind of own little vignettes. But
which makes sense. I think what you're talking about, and why I thought Airbnb, it addresses some of what I think have to be some of their primary hurdles to get people to join Airbnb. Like, to have somebody say out loud, like, how weird is it that my mom was like, you can't go stay in somebody's house, but then have somebody with an experience be able to say, and I did, and it was great. Like, I thought it was going to be this, but it was this. And I have to imagine that's the majority of people. That's why Airbnb is growing. And it's not, I only stayed there once. We rented a house with a friend in Cincinnati, because we wanted to see the Joshua Tree Tour, the 20th anniversary U2 concert.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we went on the website, and the only place left was like Cincinnati, Ohio. So we had to go to Ohio so that we could get tickets to go to the show. And so we met our friends from Michigan there, and we Airbnb'd. And it was, the guy wasn't there, so I didn't have that experience, but we just stayed in his house, and it was nice. There was great experience. I mean, you got a whole house versus a hotel.
Sure.
And so it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, to give people an idea, if you don't understand the concept of a VRBO or an Airbnb, it could be as simple as a bedroom that has a mattress, and that's it, which you're not going to pay that much for. But some people just want to make it for income, which is honorable. And hey, why not do it? But then sometimes you can rent a house.
Yeah.
And
it's got reviews, and it's got pictures. You're not going to get snuck up on. You're like, I thought I was getting a house, and I got like a...
Yeah. Well, for anybody who's like, how is that safe? If you look at, I don't want to kind of go into the minutia on your podcast or make it a commercial for any of these services. But if you learn a little bit about it, you'll see why it is safe and why so many people do it. So, but yeah, people who do these services, it's what you also make it. Like I said, some people just have a mattress, and other people, they have, Now you can rent experiences if you're in a city. And then they have a higher tier of homes, you know, if you want to stay in like what's going to be really cool and swanky. And people really, I mean, look, house flipping is a common thing nowadays. And some people flip to create it, you know, one of these kind of stays for people.
Yeah.
And you make it fancy.
I've read some books on like investing in real estate and rental properties. And now some of the books are updated with this is how to do it specifically for Airbnb. Like it all depends on your location, right? You mentioned the guy in Key West has got a place where a lot of people want to visit. That might be worth a lot more to that gentleman as an Airbnb than a monthly rental.
Exactly. Cause you can charge more. But he also enjoyed, I mean, he didn't have a job because he was making the money. I mean, he was making 15 grand a friggin' month. Now, don't go think you can make that kind of money anywhere. Key West it's an expensive place to stay where it's $500 a night for a hotel. And he was charging less than half.
Yeah.
So, and you got a better experience. You really did. He's pouring you drinks. You're at the pool. He shares his story. He's inspiring. Still follow him. What ended up happening, by the way, and the only reason I want to mention this is because it's really interesting. He had said, my goal is to do this for another year and then travel the world. If you love the idea of A, making money, and B, or traveling on a budget and not like staying like in some shit motel, then look into it because, you know.
I think it's also for adventurers. Like hotel versus that seems pretty Manila. Like you know what you're going to get. And I'm not saying that it's like Russian roulette and it's going to be crazy or nothing, but you have an opportunity to connect with somebody and you're intentionally putting yourself in a situation to run into somebody where I think a lot of us just avoid, especially like I'm an introvert. But when I have a good time with somebody, it's like the same feeling I get when I went to the gym and I didn't want to, but now I'm really glad that I did. I know I'm an introvert, but I still really like connecting with people. It's just, I don't know, harder for me or not natural.
Right. Like,
but it doesn't mean that I don't want it or need it.
Sure. Like where if like for me, I don't necessarily go up to strangers at bar. Like my stepdad can talk to anybody, anywhere. I start up a conversation with any human. I'm not that way. But
do you get jealous of those type of people? Like I get jealous of those people. I'm like, why can't I just be like you?
Because you know what? Because you never know when you're talking to somebody who's going to like enrich your life monetarily, spiritually, somehow.
Yeah.
You know, and so I am jealous of my stepdad because my mom, and then she'll go, he tells our life story to anybody at the deli counter. And it's hilarious. But yeah, this forces you into that situation because to some degree, if you're hosting people, you have to be somewhat friendly. You have to be. But that person, you know, somebody being comfortable staying somewhere, that's one thing. And by the way, it's like you could be staying at somebody's house. I mean, I think, you know, there are people that love staying at hotels and I get it. Like there's some hotels that I've enjoyed staying at too. So this is not like, don't do this, do this. But it's, you know, you end up like, when's the last time you met somebody at a hotel? Unless you met somebody who was passing through for business at the hotel bar. I suppose those kind of things do happen. But most of the time you're either traveling for leisure and you're there with your family or you're there doing business and you don't have time to connect. So
the last time I went on a vacation and intentionally, maybe it wasn't even intentionally, but it actually made a real connection was my wife and I just went on a cruise and you sit next to the same people for dinner.
Love cruises. And
they're like kind of built for that. Right. And then like day 3 came and they weren't there and I was a little bummed. Like, oh, where's our buddies? Like, so I wanted to chat with them about Brexit and all the stuff that they had going on in their life that I couldn't connect with. And
whether you're looking to make money or whether you're looking to travel, you're still going to make friends. Like those people in Phoenix said, well, it just started out as a way to make money. And we had a guest room on the opposite side of the house. It didn't even affect us. And they're like, now we've made real connections. Like we had no idea what was going to come out of this process other than making a separate stream of income.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's a cool idea for a show. And this is meant as a high compliment here. Like if there was another episode, I would have watched it.
Thank you. I
would binge that thing.
I appreciate it. I you know what? The only thing that kind of I continue with it is, and I haven't done any more of it because it takes time.
Yeah.
Right. It takes time. And and I want to do another episode for sure. But in terms of, look, we met somebody at the podcast meetup, and, I feel like she may be in a position where she can maybe help me in some way, point me in a direction where maybe this thing can get seen by somebody, and it's somebody's going to go, okay, this is unique content and we should add it, because it's not the same as all these other travel shows. And I love watching travel stuff. I love the real estate ones. I'm never going to get a house in the Caribbean, but it's so cool that these people are buying a friggin' house in the Caribbean, and they're not like losing their shorts doing it and spending a ton of money. So, I think to go back to your original question, which I completely didn't answer, when you have a concept, I think, I've been given different kinds of advice. And, when I realized that people don't take open submissions, which in radio, a lot of local musicians or mixed people want to send the radio station a mixtape. Will you listen to my mixtape and put me on the radio? And that's not how it works right now, unless you're a community radio station, that's different. But a top 40 radio station, they play what's popular, what people know. They play Taylor Swift and all these artists. So that's why local music generally doesn't get on, like a pop station or, but much in that same way, all these channels and streaming networks, they don't take open submissions. And so the wind was taken out of my sails. But another thing I've learned to know is, look, everything's about relationships. Life is about relationships. And you never know when you're going to meet somebody who's going to help make an impact in some way, shape, or form that you didn't expect. And it could come out of nowhere. Yeah. Or things could be working behind the scenes. And, can
I tell you about a hypothesis that I have that's not based on any numbers, but I really want it to happen. So maybe it's more of a desire that I have. I know for me, I get very excited when I see some kind of content that talks about my hometown. And I think, like you were mentioning before, I don't know if open submissions came to an end because the ability to put together quality content, the entry bar, the price tag to do high quality content for people that want to put in sweat equity became more attainable. Much like people start companies, they don't have to have a factory anymore, but they can have an idea and bootstrap it and get it there. And I really hope that entertainment becomes more hyper localized. Like there's shows in our city that we love, but there's no distribution for it. And so that's the challenge. There's no network or affiliation that's like, man, here is the Triangle's best shows on these things. But I feel like there would be a market for it if somebody or content creators could figure out how to get together and figure out how to distribute the stuff.
Right. Well, I will say this. My girlfriend and I watch Lover to List It.
And that's pretty local, right?
You know what? I found out they have offices in Raleigh. And then we would watch some of these episodes. And she's like, all these episodes were filmed. These particular episodes happen to all be filmed in Raleigh. And I'm like, or in Durham as well. Cause that's, another hot spot, with all the growth that Durham's been going through and everything. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, and then you see the Raleigh skyline. I love it. And then you get excited. Yeah. Like, that's so cool.
We all did that.
So, that is the $1 million question. How to, but now, like, to go back to radio, one of the stations in Vegas I was working at, the urban station, now takes submissions for local artists. And on a particular night, they'll share it on the air. So, I think
we're just a little early, but I think that there could be room for a very local entertainment scene because there's so much more content now than there used to be. And I'm not saying that we'll all give up on great shows because a great show is always going to be a great show. But I know I'm rooting for it. And I think that if there's any thing that'll help us get there sooner is people who are committed to producing great content and letting it be about the area and letting it be about this is what's great to do in this city. And that's going to make people from that city want to watch it. Yeah. And so that's pretty cool. Well, thanks, man, for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Really thanks for having me. I feel like I've talked everybody's ear off. I'm like, oh my God.
It's kind of what a podcast is.
Somehow I can't believe I'm relating radio to life, but if we were to do the same things in our life, be it with a job or be it with family, in order to sometimes take ourselves out of a routine and out of the hamster wheel, then maybe we can improve upon and making sure that we are,
like a life audit. Just stop and pay attention to your life for a second and see where it's at.
Your life doesn't revolve around your job, even if you love it.
Yeah.
So anyway,
if there's an answer, and I don't think I know what it is, but I bet I know what is in the answer. And I think the answer has nothing to do with how you balance your time, getting better at time blocking, being more effective at work, being more productive with your family. I think the answer has to be, it's going to be something so dead dumb simple like content. Just learn to be content. Don't worry about trying to be 14% better at this. Be where you're at and do that thing. It's kind of like the old man said.
Yes.
Be happy.
Be happy.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Be happy.
We love making this stuff for you. You can help us out by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Get unstuck, tell a better story, and have a good answer to the question, what are you doing today?